Hey, thanks for clicking on my video. If this video helps you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. It is greatly appreciated and it really helps. Let's get to the video. In this video, we're going to talk about how we can write some trigonometric functions from a graph. So first of all, you might see this vocabulary word as sinusoid. So a sinusoid is just a graph of a sine or cosine function. And so to write a function for a sinusoid, we need to find some values. We need to know what A is, we need to know what B is, we need to know what H is, and we need to know what K is. So remember, A is going to be our amplitude. Period is going to help us to find B. Period is equal to 2 pi over B. And then H and K, those are our horizontal and vertical shifts. Okay, so we can see that here on the screen for both sine and for cosine. So we're going to do two examples, one of each. So here in example number one, here's our graph. Excuse my squiggly lines here, but that's the best I could do. So notice here we have a couple points, pi over 4, 13, and we have 5 pi over 8, negative 5. So the first thing I want to do is find my value for K, and that's going to involve my maximum and my minimum. So my maximum I see is 13, and my minimum I see is negative 5. So now to find K, I'm just going to add them together and divide by 2. So let's say 13 plus negative 5 divided by 2. So that would be like 13 minus 5 is 8. So 8 over 2, and that's going to be 4. So now I'm going to circle that, and I'm going to say K is equal to 4. Okay? So now let's think about, does this represent a sine or a cosine function? So if this represents a sine function, then when K is equal to 4, so that would be about right here, K is equal to 4, our function, if it's sine, then our point should be on the y-axis at 4. Well, it's not. It is still up at 13. So we know this is a cosine function. So we're going to be using cosine. So y is equal to a, cosine b, this would be like x minus h plus k. Well, we know that our point for cosine is still on the y-axis, so it hasn't been horizontally shifted. So we know that h is actually equal to 0. So we know what h is, we know what k is, so now let's find a and b. So for the period, we know that the period is equal to 2 pi over b. And if we notice here, it looks like our period here is pi over 4. It takes us pi over 4 units to repeat our pattern. So let's set this equal to pi over 4, and let's cross multiply and solve. So this is going to be 8 pi is equal to b pi, or we could, write that as pi b. Either way is fine. And so now let's just divide both sides by pi, and we're going to figure out that b is equal to 8. Okay, so now we have b. We have h, we have k, so now let's find a, which would be our amplitude. So for amplitude, we're going to use our minimum and maximum again, but this time we are going to subtract them and divide by 2. So the maximum is 13 minus negative 5 divided by 2. So 13 minus negative 5 would be like 13 plus 5, so that's going to give us an 18 over 2, which would be equal to 9. So now we know that a is equal to 9, and we have all the information that we need. So now we can say y is equal to 9 cosine of 8, and we said that h is equal to 0, so this is just 8x, and then plus 4 because k was 4. Okay, so that would be our example for, or that would be our function for example number 1. All right, now example number 2. This is going to be a sine function. We did cosine on example 1, so we'll do sine on example 2. So once again, let's start off by finding k. So let's do our maximum and our minimum. Okay, so it looks like our maximum here is at negative 1, and our minimum here is at negative 3. So let's add those together, negative 1 plus negative 3, and divide that by 2. So negative 4 over 2, and we get negative 2. So k is equal to negative 2. So now, once again, if we were to put in our line here, our midline at negative 2, then it's a sine function if the point on my graph is on the y-axis at 2. And notice that it is right there, right? And it's still there, and that means number 1, it's a sine function, and number 2, we have not shifted left or right. So we're going to use y is equal to a sine b of x minus h plus k. But once again, we have no horizontal shift, so h is equal to 0. So now let's find our period, or let's use our period to find the value of b. Okay, so now we've got period is equal to 2 pi over b. And so now let's look at our graph. Well, we're starting here. If we start here at 0, we go up, back down, and here we're starting again. So it looks like 2 would be our period. So this is equal to 2. So now if we cross multiply, we'd get 2b is equal to 2 pi. So we divide both sides by 2, and we get b is equal to pi. So now we know h, we know k, we know b. Let's find our amplitude, which would be a. So amplitude. So we're going to take our maximum and minimum and subtract them this time. So -1 minus -3, divide that by 2. So this would be -1 plus 3 over 2. So 2 over 2, which is equal to 1. So now we know that a is equal to 1. However, if we look at the shape of our graph, typically our sine function would be going in this direction right here, right? And so it looks like we actually do have a reflection going on. So a needs to be less than 0, meaning that a needs to be -1. Okay, so now we have all the pieces we need. We can write our function. So y is equal to -1, or we'll just write a negative, sine, and then we said b was pi, so pi, x minus 0, or just x, and then k is -2. So our function for the graph for number 2 would be y is equal to negative sine pi of x minus 2. And that's how you can write some trigonometric functions of sinusoids from their graph.